Good there. All right. Well, I want to welcome you guys to How to Start Online Groups. My name is Alan White. If we haven't met before, I've been a pastor for exactly 30 years this year, and actually preached my sermon when I was 17, so that was 38 years ago. But I help churches and pastors, help to encourage them and help them with their small group ministries. And I was thinking back as everybody's scrambling, to get groups online, with the coronavirus and social distancing, and some people, whether, it's by choice or by mandate, are having to stay at home. So how can the church be the church when it can't meet? I think that's the big issue that we're facing right now. And I was remembering back, I was in an online small group in 1992. So this makes me sound really, really old to some of you guys, and it's going to get worse. I had my online small group. We met on CompuServe before anybody was on the internet. We were in CompuServe, and you connected with a dial-up phone modem back in the day, and the bandwidth was very, very slow. We couldn't do video. We couldn't do anything. You couldn't even download a picture if you wanted to. But we had this online small group on CompuServe. It was in a Christian forum, and all we had on there was a message board and a chat room. So you didn't know the picture, you didn't know what people looked like, they couldn't talk, you couldn't do video or anything, but in this format, we had this online small group. And so we had one of our members of our group, his name is Greg, and Greg joined our Christian forum because at the time, and again, this seems like ancient history, on CompuServe, if you were to log in, you paid a certain amount for a monthly account, and then you had to pay per minute to be on CompuServe. And so the Christian forum offered a flat rate. And so Greg was not interested in the Christianity portion of this. He was just interested that it was a low flat rate and he was getting a deal. And so we would joke around and he would be on there. We were getting to know him and all of that. And one day he posted a message, and the message was, Jesus died for my sins. And I thought, man, we joked around a lot, but I thought if he's joking with this, he has crossed a line and we're going to have to deal with this. And so opened up his message and looked at it, and lo and behold, through his interactions with the rest of us in the group and all of that, he came to Christ. And it was really, really remarkable that, in this forum, we didn't know each other. So we all converged on his house in Southern California. We had never met in person before. We were joking that we were all going to have to sit with our laptops in a circle with our backs to each other in order to communicate, because we'd never communicated in person before. But it actually worked out great. And I baptized Greg in his jacuzzi, which was kind of the way in Southern California. But years later, Greg was a groomsman in my wedding. A couple of years ago, I performed his son's wedding. And all of that happened from this, what started out as an anonymous people on a small group on CompuServe. So consider, and I do online groups all the time like this, and coaching groups and different groups that I've done this way. And so I guess, I could possibly be the grandfather of online small groups because I've been doing it for, off and on for 28 years. So anyway, let's get to it. This is a unique opportunity in the life and ministry of the church. So why do we need online groups? And these are the reasons I see. People are isolated. And again, whether they've been told to stay home, whether they're choosing to stay home, people are isolated. And in all of this, people are fearful. They don't know, when is this going to peak? How long is this going to be? And if they're isolated and they're at home and they're listening to the news all the time, that's really going to create a lot of fear in their lives. People are lonely. They can't connect. I know they have a thing now with Netflix where you can watch a movie online with your friends, and you can all be online and you don't have to be in the same room. But people need each other. A friend of mine posted on Facebook the other day. He said, check in on your extroverted friends. We are not okay. And so I've actually been making a few calls to people and, just needing to talk, calling my dad. My dad's going to be 80 years old the 1st of May, and making sure he's okay. My sister lives nearby, but everybody needs to talk because they're not around people. They're not, talking at the water cooler at work in many cases. People have spiritual and emotional needs. And again, and just as much as they would normally, but now being isolated, being quarantined in some cases, well, how are you going to talk to? How are you going to provide pastoral care? And for you guys, I mean, even if you're in what's considered a smaller church, the reality is you can't possibly connect with every single person in your church. And then the last is that people have practical and physical needs. So for people who are unable to get out and go to the grocery store, people who are unable, maybe they're sick and they need some help, and maybe they live by themselves. So how can the church help? And maybe it's a matter of you find out what they need, you go buy the items, you place it on their doorstep, you give them a call, keep that social distancing going, and you have a no contact delivery. But how do we even know what the needs are? And again, to think about calling everybody on your church's roll, calling down your database, is a bit daunting. And so I think this is a time where we can launch small groups, and because the need is so great that if anything else, even if this isn't perfect, even if everyone is not perfectly trained, the reality is that people will give you a little bit of grace because you're making an effort to meet their need. I mean, you look at, I don't know if you've noticed or watched Jimmy Fallon from The Tonight Show. And Jimmy Fallon right now is doing The Tonight Show from home. And his wife is operating the camera, and his kids are climbing all over him, and he's trying to do his best to pull off a show. And everybody knows that this isn't going to be perfect. Everybody knows that it's okay if it's not perfect. And so the same thing with our groups. It may not be the perfect leader. It may not be the perfect circumstance. It may not be the perfect experience, but to be able to offer something to care, to help our people, to help them to debrief all of these things that are circulating around in their head. Because let's face it, fear and isolation, I mean, that's a page straight out of the devil's playbook. I mean, the enemy can have a heyday in this time because people are separated from each other, and he kind of has this divide and conquer strategy anyway. I mean, his mission is to steal and to kill and to destroy. And so to fill people full of fear, to keep them apart. But this is also the time for us to redefine what the church is. And we always talk about the church is not just a service. Well, we don't have a service. So the church is, that's not even, the church has got to be the church. And we can't meet together. We can't meet within the four walls. We can't meet in living rooms. So how do we offer care to our people? So I have a few areas that I want to talk about, 7 things that you need to start online groups. And then we'll end with questions that you guys have that you put in your registration, and then we'll open it up for other questions maybe we didn't get to. And then my hope, fingers crossed, is I have a member of one of my coaching groups that's going to join us at the end and tell us about groups that she just launched off of the online service last Sunday in her church and what they're doing to manage all of that. So hang on to the end, because that's probably going to be the best part. And if this gets boring, you know what? Just log off and come back in half an hour. It'll be great. But anyway, don't do that. It'll hurt my feelings. All right. Number 1, what do you need? You need a willing, caring person to initiate the group. And again, the emphasis is going to be on care. So you don't necessarily need someone who is well-versed in the Bible. You don't necessarily need someone who has been through all of the hoops of assimilation or whatever else, but you need a willing, caring person. Now, we're going to help that person. We're not going to just throw them to the wolves, but we need somebody that is open, that can care, because I said this in my blog post this last week, is that if we're depending on online services to carry our church through, the reality is a lot of other churches can produce better online services than our churches probably can. So when all of this is done, where are your people going to go, and where are your people going to give? And I'll let you in on the secret right now. Your people are going to go to where they've received care. And if somebody else is reaching out for them, It's kind of fair game. But let's look beyond this. We have people that are isolated, alone, and fearful who maybe they've never darkened the door of your church. Maybe they haven't been there for years. Maybe they're CEOs, Christmas and Easter only. So we need to get all hands on deck. And so if you've looked into host homes or church-wide campaigns and have felt reluctant about it, or maybe we need to have more requirements, or, maybe they needed to go through more of a process before they could lead. This is the thing. We're in a war. We're in a battle right now. And as many people as you could possibly enlist to help you care for the members of your church, care for their neighbors, care for their coworkers, and do something. If they're willing and they're caring, this is the time to enlist them. And the bottom line is, if we're afraid that we might mess it up, you know what? It's okay, because this is a season where we have the grace, because of the circumstance, that it doesn't have to be perfect. So find a willing and caring person. Now, if what I just said to you is too risky for you, or it just scared you to death, there is another way that you can do this. And this is all on you. Go down your membership roll. Go down your membership roll and name by name, call every member that you feel good about leading a group and saying, I need your help right now. Because a lot of the other activities, if they were coaching soccer, if they were, working at a bank, if they were doing a lot of other things that were taking up their time, they may still be working at the bank. You just have to go through the drive-through. But they're not in as much of a hurry as they were. I hear people can still go out and play golf, but you can't play basketball. Can't watch any sports unless it's 10 years old on TV, right? So call down your list, and even the people that were busy, even the people that are committed to other things. What are your ushers doing this week? Nothing. What are your greeters doing this week? Nothing. What are your parking lot attendants doing this week? Nothing. What are your children's ministry workers doing this week? Nothing. What are your youth? We can go on down the line, right? They don't have any responsibilities because we're not having a service on campus. So all of those people that you know, all of those people that you trust, at least for this season, could get a group going. So I'm going to let our guests tell you how they launched groups this last weekend, but I'll give you a little heads up. If your pastor is open to inviting willing and caring people to start a group, you can do that off of an email. You can do that off of the weekend service. And you can find people that are willing to get together with other people. Maybe they have to learn a little technology. Maybe they don't. We'll get into that in a minute. But make a call to see who's willing. And if there are people on the list, you're like, oh, no, we can't do that. Then you're going to have a pastoral conversation about that. But anybody that's willing. Otherwise, what happens is you're going to have to go through and recruit as many people, because once you open this up, who would like to be in an online group? People have time on their hands. People are not in a hurry right now. So, suddenly everybody has time for a group. That was always our number one excuse. And so we need as many people as we possibly can to get in there and help with groups, help with pastoral care, help to give hope, and help to spread faith, right, in this time. All right, number 2, you need a system to connect people. Now, I'm going to go back to my old standby, and because I still think it's the best system. The best way to get into a group is to start a group, because if you start the group, you're in, right? Second best way to get into a group is by personal invitation. And so what I would say to every one of those people that are willing and caring and they want to start a group is to say, who do you know that would benefit from a group like this? And they can think about their family, their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers. Who do they know that would benefit from a group like this? And if they can fill the group up that way, that's great, because a couple of things are happening. One is that from a pastoral point of view, if people were signing up for these groups, then we would feel like, okay, they need to be a little better trained. They need to be more thoroughly vetted. Because if they're signing up for the group or we're advertising the groups, then we're kind of giving an implied endorsement that this group is okay. And so if we're leaving it to the members, if we're leaving it to these people who are volunteering to do these online groups, and they invite people, the people that they invite for the most part should know what they're in for, right? They know the person, it's their friend. And so we don't have to advertise the groups. They could just invite people that they know. And here's the interesting thing. If we give our people permission and opportunity, it's amazing what they will be open to, how creative they will be, and what they'll be able to do. And you think of online groups, they could do an online group with people no matter where they live. They could do an online group any time of the day. You know, there's a lot of flexibility to all of this. And if they don't know a lot of people, then you know what? They can invite a couple of people. Those couple of people invite a couple of people. Now, the problem with that is, and at a church of any size, this is an issue. What if somebody wants to be in a group and they didn't get invited? Well, in that case, we could do a couple of things. One is we could take those names and we could look at the groups that we have. We could look at the people who volunteered to start these new groups, and we could send them to a group that we feel good about. There's one church that was using, I think, one of the platforms, it might have been Zoom, and people just showed up and then Zoom put them in a room, and then the room had a leader. I thought, well, that's an interesting way to sort out groups. I like the personal invitation a little bit better than that. But if you have people that weren't invited, they want to be part of a group, then you can certainly send them to a group that they feel good about. Or the other way is, if you need more groups than the ones you feel good about, is you're going to have to give a little bit of a disclaimer. You're going to have to set an expectation that many of these leaders have never led before. And our purpose here is to provide care. A purpose here is to provide a place for conversation. Because here's the dilemma right now. People don't need more content. I mean, they've got content coming in left and right. They don't need more content. They need conversation. And so if the idea is these groups are for care and conversation, you could even call them care and conversation groups. So people aren't expecting an inductive Bible study. But you could say, you know what? These are folks who are willing to help. They're willing to care. They're willing to provide conversation. They're willing to start a group. And you know what? They're brand new. So would you give them a little bit of grace? Don't expect that Kay Arthur's going to be leading your group. You know, don't expect that Charles Stanley is going to be leading their group. Give them a little bit of grace. But this is what we're doing because everybody needs somebody in this situation. And, you know, even the hashtag for the CDC that talks about alone together or apart together. That's kind of how we are right now. We know that we're better together, even if we're apart online. Number 3, you need some sort of platform to meet on. I'm not going to go into great amount of detail. I wouldn't recommend CompuServe because I don't think it's even around anymore. But if you just, you know, Google, there are quite a number of different platforms. If you haven't seen the document that Jason McGrath put together last week, he does a comparison of pros and cons of different platforms. I would encourage you to find that. In fact, I'll send it to you guys after the webinar if you haven't seen it already. He just did it for his church. And I put it on my blog post the last 2 weeks, and it's been very popular. But currently, right now, we're using Zoom. And you guys have been in meetings with me before. We've used Zoom. Zoom has a couple of options. There's a free option where you can pull a group together, and you can have a group of up to 100 people. I don't recommend that. They would look very, very tiny on your screen. But the thing about the free option of Zoom is that the meeting only lasts for 30 minutes. And at the end of 30 minutes, it will cut off, and that's the end of it. Now, if you only want them to meet for 30 minutes, give them the free edition of Zoom. Otherwise, you can pay for it. I think I pay $14.99 a month for Zoom. I don't have the webinar platform. And then somebody's going to have to schedule out when groups meet so they don't compete there. You can have multiple hosts. You can have multiple accounts. They're going to have the ability to go into to access the login. GoToMeeting I used for years. It's probably 4 times as expensive as Zoom. But I used GoToMeeting for a lot of years. A lot of people are like, I went onto this thing called GoToMeeting. What is that? Google Hangouts is free. And so you can join Google Hangouts. And I know Google has other platforms. There's Google Meets, which is part of the G Suite package. WebEx has free meetings that are available. And so the other good thing about some of these, I know especially with Zoom and GoTo are the ones that I'm the most familiar with, is that if a person is not able to log on by video, there's usually a call-in number. And so they can call into the meeting if they're not able to come on by video. Now, I recommend doing this by video simply because it's more personal. You can see what's going on. The other thing is you can see when somebody else is about to talk. Whereas if you're on a phone call, then it's a lot of go ahead, go ahead. Now, if you have people that this is just would be mind-boggling to them, they wouldn't even want to try it. You can go to something like freeconferencecall.com. And I have a number on Free Conference Call that they just call in on their phone. They can call in on their landline. And nowadays, with most phone service, they're really long distance is irrelevant. They're not paying long distance charges, especially if they call in on a cell phone. And so they can just call into the number. It's a conference call. There's no video attached to it whatsoever. And it's free. So you don't have to worry about that. A couple of things etiquette-wise doing online groups. I've done a lot of online groups, a lot of webinars over the years. You want to use earphones or earbuds because that's going to prevent feedback from taking place. Now, if two people are meeting together, they're going to have to squeeze in a little close, and then they're going to have to share earbuds. That's what young people do when they want to get close to somebody that they're interested in. Oh, watch this on my phone. Oh, here's my earbud. Oh, you got to sit close to me. But anyway, and they're meeting with their husband or wife, right? The other way would be if they had multiple devices. I know with Zoom and GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts as well, you can use your computer, you can use phone, you can use tablet. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can access that, and people can have their own phone even if they're in the same room as their spouse. But if they've got earbuds in, it's not going to provide any kind of feedback on the audio. The other thing that it's going to do is, again, they're personal and you can see their face, or if they're sitting together, you can see them together, and that works out fine. Now, I've heard some problems in the online group, on the small group network group, about families with young children. And so the kids are crashing in, they're disrupting the meeting and all of that. Here's where I would go. Have them put their kids to bed first. And then meet at 8 o'clock at night, 8:30 at night. You may be interrupting some rerun of some championship game from 1972 or something, but you can probably do that on demand, right? But do it late at night. Kids are already in bed. You don't have to, And again, the other thing about this is it's not perfect. And if kids come crashing in, just like Jimmy Fallon's kids come crashing in, crawling all over him while he's trying to do the Tonight Show, I think we can have a little bit of grace for that. Because if we're trying to do this spiritual thing online, and yet our kids are interfering with that, probably our number one spiritual investment is with our children, right? And so we don't want to exclude them from what we're doing. But we can meet later at night. And I joke about things, but, I've been on enough webinars over the years. You hear dogs barking, you hear, kids crying, your toilets flushing. So, encourage your people, don't take your device into the bathroom with you. Just, put it on pause, and we'll catch up with you when you come back. I think the other thing too is you want people to avoid any kind of distractions. So if they're on and they're not using their phone, they need to turn their phone off. They need to shut down other windows on their computer so that they're devoting themselves to the meeting and they're present with the group in the meeting, and try to eliminate all of those other kinds of distractions. If there is background noise, if the neighbor's dog is barking, if the neighbor's decided at 8 o'clock at night to start mowing his lawn, or Ralph, in your case, running the snowblower, then you can mute yourself during the conversation. And then when it comes to your turn to speak, or you have something to say, just unmute yourself and share, and then mute yourself again. And again, just kind of things we don't normally think about, but just kind of courteous things as we go online. I'm in the process of taking the first chapter of my Leading Healthy Groups book, which is called How to Start a Group, and or starting a group for the first time. I'm adapting that chapter to how to start an online group for the first time. And so hopefully I will have that finished by the end of the day, tomorrow at the latest, and it'll be a download. I'll send you guys the link to that. And that's something that you can share with your group leaders. Some of it is the same as any other group. Some of it's different because you have a little online etiquette you have to consider. All right, let's move on to number 4 because we have a guest coming and I've got 7 things. Curriculum to guide them. And I'm actually going to let our guest speak to this a little bit. If you're focused mostly on care, then your questions need to be more of what do you think? What's on your mind? What's on your mind right now? What are you worried about? How can we pray for you? Some of those kinds of questions we could build in. But curriculum, we could do a variety of things. Your services are online. You could write a short discussion guide, 6 or 8 questions based on the pastor's sermon that you could send out. You could email out to everybody who's willing to do this, and you would do great. If you want to take that up a notch, you could actually shoot a 5-minute video, either with your pastor on it, or you could shoot it yourself as an introduction to the group. And I know some of these services like Zoom, you can actually stream the video over the teleconference device. This is getting too complicated. Just ignore this part. So you can watch the video together and then discuss it. The other way that you could do it is you could send the link out to the group members, ask them to watch the video before the meeting, and then just get together for discussion and not having to worry about streaming the video. The one thing that I will say here is you need to be directive as to what they study. Because you don't want them studying the latest from Oprah's book club or something by, Deepak Chopra and getting a nice dose of Hinduism. You don't want them out there doing anything. You want to guide them as far as what to study. So make a sermon discussion guide, make some kind of a downloadable study available to them, but be directive in what they're doing. Because if it's based on the pastor's sermon, they watch the service, they do the discussion, they watch a short video, they have the discussion. I think that works out great. But for a lot of people, they're going to be intimidating by the idea that they have to teach something. And here's the other side as a pastor. You don't want these leaders teaching. You want them facilitating a discussion. And so, kind of take the fear factor, the risk out of this for both sides. They don't need to teach and you don't want them to teach. So give them a curriculum where it's all built in, where it's just a discussion, or you provide some sort of a video that would be the basis of the teaching. And then, and then you would go to the discussion from that. Here's the cool thing that I've seen with video-based curriculum. And I don't believe every leader for the rest of their life needs to use video-based curriculum. I believe that eventually we need to train our leaders to rightly divide the word of truth, and they can sit down and open up their Bible and lead a discussion. That's where I think we should go. But for right now, for people that are, they're willing, they're caring, they'll give this a try. This is a trial run at this. And so we want to guide them as much as we can. And then if they're interested in continuing, then we begin to increase the training and help them along as we go. But we don't expect them to be perfect from the very beginning. Here's the cool thing about video. I've worked with a number of churches where their pastor would create curriculum with his teaching on it. People would invite their friends, their neighbors, the coworkers. I've had 2 churches. One was an Assemblies of God church in Renton, Washington. The other was a United Methodist church in Warner Robins, Georgia. Both churches of about 2,500. They did 2 series back to back with their pastors teaching on the video. They got to a place, both churches of 2,500 had 5,000 people in groups. So had twice as many people in groups as they had in the weekend. And what they began to experience was people would come to their friend's home for the group first. They would be introduced to their pastor on video. And then when they were invited to come to church, they felt like they already knew the pastor, because they had experienced it on video. We have this opportunity right now. People could get into a group because they're fearful, they're isolated, they're lonely, they want a group of people that they can connect with. they'll receive care. They'll get a little bit of teaching. They'll have some discussion. Oh, by the way, these questions, this study is based on what our pastors speak about on Sunday. Let me send you the link to his sermon. And they start watching online. And then once coronavirus hopefully blows over, then you invite them to come to church with you. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing? Wouldn't that be amazing that after the end of this, your church was bigger than it ever had been instead of being declining and shrinking? Wouldn't that be amazing? We really have a unique moment. And I know some guys are like in their bunker with their helmet on, waiting to just, wait out the storm. They're scrambling, trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. But I mean, we have an amazing opportunity because people have a spiritual need and we have a spiritual answer. And I think this is the time to connect with people. This is the time to provide a place of community and conversation, as awkward as it is online. And we can reach people unlike we've ever been able to do before. All right, I got to get to number 7 so we can have our guest. Number 5, just-in-time training and coaching. You don't have time to do a lot of small group training right now because what I'm saying is this Sunday, ask your pastor to say something about groups, have them text, have them send an email to you, however that goes. Find out who they are. Tell them this is what we do. This is the format, whatever platform you're going to use, and get them going. Now, the fail-safe to this is I'm trusting that you already have some small group leaders. And so your current small group leaders, I would encourage them, challenge them to say, hey, we've got all of these new leaders. Would you help me care for these new leaders? So the new leaders are out there caring for people, and then your experienced leaders are there to care for the new leaders. Whether you want to call them a coach, a mentor is probably too heavy of a whether you just want to call them a helper, a buddy. I did that one time. I got buddies. But they're to check in with the leader, to give them a call, see how they're doing, answer their questions, pray for them, encourage them. You may want to pull them together for a little bit of training. How are you going to do training? You're going to do training on your online platform. You think about every meeting that you have, you could do online. And I think once all of this is said and done and we're back to normal, I think a lot of those meetings that we were making people do, we could keep them online and not have to make them, get to the church, bring their kids, and it's late at night when they leave and school the next day. We could just continue to do some of this online. And so I think we have a unique opportunity. People aren't going to need a lot of training. Most people can talk. Most people can read a list of questions. But if we provide a coach to them, I have a little allergy, so I got to stop and have a drink. I don't have coronavirus, I promise. I'm on 2 allergy medications, but I live in South Carolina, and this is the time of year that all of our cars turn yellow because they're covered with pollen from the pine trees. So anyway, no coronavirus, just the normal allergies. But as people, just let them get started. And then you have a coach there who's able to answer their questions. I was working with a guy years ago. He was actually out in Katy, Texas. And he had a background in corporate training. And we were talking about what he was doing and how he was caring for his leaders. And he said, and they used coaches. He said, this may sound odd coming from a background of corporate training. But he said, what I've discovered is the best training that I can provide is from the person who's the most proximate to the person who has the question. So it wasn't the most qualified person. It wasn't the most experienced person. It was the person that was available. And so for the coach to be available, then they, out of their experience of leading a group, they've led a new group. Now, some of the technology may be different. You find whether you're into the various kinds of technology or find somebody in your church that's into technology that can give them a little tutorial on all of this. But that experienced leader can be a great help to you, and it can be a great help to that new leader. And of course, if you're asking, number 6, follow-up and feedback, if you're asking for an experienced leader to go out and to connect with these new leaders, and let's say their assignment is to call them once a week, well, then you want to find out what's going on. You want to find out, did the group get started? How are they doing? What kind of questions are they coming up with? You know, and hear what's going on overall, because that could be helpful to all of your leaders. And you may have to redirect a little bit in how you do all of this. But you want to have follow-up with these leaders because they've committed to do something, and then you want to provide that care and that follow-up for them. Plus, you want to hear feedback on how this is going, and, you know, are people showing up, or, you know, what are the issues that are going on? One of the things I heard today was that some people, they may be off at work, they may be at home, but now all of a sudden they have this time and their honey-do list has gotten longer. So they don't have quite as much available time because they have to do all these chores around the house. All right, let's go to number 7, and then we're going to get into some of your questions. Supervision and accountability. What we're doing is important work. If we're asking for somebody who's willing and caring to do a group with 6 or 8 people, that's a big responsibility. And then we're asking an experienced leader to look after 2 or 3 of these groups. Well, now they've got, you know, 25, 30 people maybe that they're responsible for. That's significant. And because this is important, we have to, if we've asked them to follow up after the leaders, then we need to follow up after the coaches. Because the idea is that we would care for these coaches. The coaches would care for the leaders would care for the people. And this is not unique to me. This is Jethro's advice to Moses in Exodus 18. That you would have leaders of 10s, those are the group leaders, the online group leaders, leaders of 50s and 100s, those are coaches, leaders of thousands, if you have thousands, you may need that. Otherwise, it's you. And so the accountability kind of goes like this. You call them up and you say, the coaches, you call them up and you say, hey, what are you hearing from your small group leaders? What are you hearing from these new hosts or these online group leaders? And then if they'll tell you what's going on. If for some reason they haven't made the call, then you go back and say, well, you know what? Why don't you take the next couple of days, you know, give them a call, see how they're doing, and I'll call you on Saturday and to hear, you know, what they've done. So now if they haven't done it, you've given them a deadline and they know that you're gonna follow up. Because I mean, the reality is, it's a principle we've heard, is that we have to inspect what we expect. And so if we expect this to be done, then we need to make a call. Now, some of this may seem a little clunky initially, because if an experienced leader is only calling in on 1 or 2 new leaders, then why can't I, the small group pastor, just call all of the new leaders myself? And there's a couple of reasons. One is you're not going to be able to offer the level of care or availability to them that somebody with just 1 or 2 would have. If you've got a list of 25 or 30, it's too much. You're not going to have that much time. The other thing is, this is an opportunity. Somebody said a long time ago, never let a good crisis go to waste. We are in a crisis. You can change the model of how you do groups right now in a crisis. So we are inundated with new leaders that have never done this before. I'm enlisting my established leaders to care for them and look after them. And if I've got established leaders caring for new leaders and it takes responsibility off of my shoulders, why in the world wouldn't I want that to continue? Right? All right. Let's go to your questions you wrote, and then we'll go to other questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's my last slide. The result of all of this is you're going to have more care in your congregation, and care is a big factor right now. Care and conversation is a big factor right now, because people have content. People can go on YouTube and they can find all kinds of pastors preaching all kinds of sermons, and they can find services that are very dialed in, but it's the person, the church that cares for them right now that's going to make a difference. They're going to have more help this way because somebody is personally connecting with them to pray for them, to pray about the things they're worried about, to help them with practical needs that are going on in their life. There's going to be less fear. Fear is a powerful thing. In fact, I would say right now in our society, fear is more powerful than the coronavirus itself because of what it's driving people to do. I mean, who knew there would ever be a shortage of toilet paper? For Pete's sake. Why? Out of fear. But if we get people together, because if they're by themselves, they hear all this negative stuff, they're filled with fear, that just becomes a big, ugly monster in their head. And like I said, the devil's going to have a heyday with this. But they get together, they talk about what they're worried about. Then there's going to be less fear, less isolation. Even if they can't be together, they can connect. And it could be the start of something great. If you've had elders, if you've had leadership that have been reluctant to starting small groups with host homes or doing church-wide campaigns because we can't have anybody doing that, or we need to offer a quality experience, or one of those other excuses that's out there that I've heard over the years, the reality is this is your excuse to pull out the stops, let people in, let people lead, start groups, and don't ever look back. This is the start of connecting with your community and helping them and serving them and caring for them in a way that you may not have ever been able to do before. And I think it could be a very awesome thing. Okay, so let's go through a few questions, and our guest has arrived, and I'll introduce her in a minute. Should we start online groups now or in the fall? Yes. Definitely start online groups start groups in the fall, but you know what? This is a unique season, and you're never going to see this again in your lifetime. And you think about this, our last big event in our society was 9/11. And the Sunday after 9/11, I mean, our church services were fuller than they'd ever been at any Easter. You guys remember that. Well, now we have people that are filled, we have a crisis. We have people filled with fear, and they can't go to church. Where are they going to go? I think that you could get more people going into online groups right now than you may even have in the fall. So I wouldn't waste this opportunity. Startup time needed to train new leaders. You know what? Give them a coach, throw them in the deep end. It'll go great. Resistance to joining a group of strangers. You know, I think that people could start to get over that a little bit if they have enough of a need. But again, I think start with people inviting people they know, and then people, you know, that they invite. And if somebody is, you know, I live poor introverts, they get dragged to groups that, you know, they don't know anybody, or they, you know, get thrown into a group or whatever. They're never going to host a group because they don't want a group of strangers. You know what? Most introverts I know have 5 or 6 really good friends, and say, you know what? Why don't you do this with your friends and connect with your friends? And they don't have to be with strangers. I mean, if they're from, you know, out of town, they've just moved, they don't know anybody at church, you know what? You're online. They can connect with anybody in the world. How to recruit new people. Again, I would go invitation first. And then if you have people that don't know where to go, don't know how to sign up, then you do that second. Curriculum and resources we kind of covered. Sustainability of frequency. Again, I think people have time right now. I would shoot for a weekly group. And if they can't do a weekly, do every other week. But I would shoot for a weekly group, at least for, you know, say every week for the next 6 weeks. And then we'll see where we are in 6 weeks. If they want to re-up, if they want to continue. All right. Does the small group director join each group and then hand it off? I think the risk of that is that they're going to start depending on the small group director, and they're not going to want to give that up. So I would rather, you know, again, give a host, a coach, and then stay out of it. How to train leaders, we've kind of covered that. Viewing videos, you can do that online. And again, it depends on how savvy your people are, but they could view the video before, or you could just base the questions off of the sermon. So, I went too far. Now I'm going to introduce our guest, and let me unmute you. That would be nice of me, wouldn't it? Unmute. There we go. So I'm going to shut off this share. Stop share so you can see our guest. This is Tara Wiley, and Tara Wiley is at a church called The Pursuit in Minot, North Dakota. How about that? Now, you're not the furthest north on this call, because we have Ralph on here, and Ralph is at St. John's, Newfoundland. Which is the easternmost city in the North America. So anyway, yeah. So Tara, last Sunday, you guys did something that I want you to explain to the rest of the folks on here regarding online groups. So tell us what you did and what happened.
Yeah. Man, thanks for the opportunity. It's been a real thrill to see God at work. So we did an online service on Sunday, and ahead of time, we had set up, we used Text in Church, which, by the way, is doing 60 days free for any church that wants to sign up right now. So if you don't have a Text in Church account, you can still try it out and see what you think. And I'm not a Text in Church person. That was not a plug that I get some sort of payment for. But we used Text in Church. And the pastor during his sermon spoke about the importance of community right now and said, man, if you're ready to create a space for spiritual conversation, just text groups to this phone number. So they would text the phone number, and we had an auto reply that asked for a little more information. And then I sent them an email and said, man, we're going to equip you with everything you need to create a conversation around Christ in this time. And then I invited them to a Zoom call. And on Monday at noon and 7 p.m., I did a quick training where I talked about what the group would be like, what kind of discussion guide I would give them, how to find their people, how to invite their people. I gave them a handout that was like 3 steps to start your online community group. And then I finished the time off with those who wanted to stay after that didn't feel super tech savvy. I gave them a training on how to start a Google Hangout. And we had 30 people sign up to start online groups. It was amazing. So for us, that was a really big deal. We're a church of 1,500. We have currently, why am I not coming up with the number? Under 60 groups. And so to have 30 new groups start in a day was just so exciting. And we have recruited some of our current group leaders to be, we're calling them new host champions. And they are reaching out to each one of those. So we're assigning them to these 30 people. And they're just reaching out and saying, hey, I'm here. I'm in your corner. I'm going to ask you how things are going, answer any questions you have. And if I don't know the answers, I'll direct you to Tara, and just be a touch point so that we can have them then answer back up to us about what's going on in group life. And then in addition, because it's unusual and because it's online, I am doing online office hours. So I've just been opening up a Zoom meeting and people can pop in. I actually popped over to hear from one of my online office hours, and my different leaders just pop in and ask questions and say, this is what's going on. I'm not, my group's ghosting me. What's going on? That kind of stuff. And we kind of brainstorm through it together. It's been amazing. I can't wait to see what God does next. So
Now, let me ask you, out of the 30 that signed up,
yes.
how well did you know them?
So I would say about 50% of them I knew well.
Okay.
50% of them, out of the remaining 50%, maybe a quarter of them I knew their name.
Okay.
And then there were some that were completely new to me. We even have
cool.
some, it is really cool. We even had one out of state. So she's just decided, I need community right now. I know about the pursuit from a friend. I plugged in to the service and I want to be part of this.
Why not?
Why not? I mean, the more the merrier. I want to equip as many people as I can. This is what the body of Christ is about. So it's super exciting.
See, for the rest of you guys, I had a cousin that for a long time lived in Minot, North Dakota, and one of their slogans is "Why not Minot?" So I say "Why not" a lot.
Why not? Why not? Why not?
Tara. Yeah. Okay, so you enlisted your established leaders to be these new host champions, which I would call coach,
but right? But we have a reason not to. But anyway,
no, okay, well, we won't go into that. But so. How did you approach them? How did you get them to volunteer? How are you matching them up? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, so we reached out to them. So here's the irony. And I mean, it's true on multiple levels right now. We can look back and see how God was equipping us for such a time as this. Mm-hmm. We were already intending to do a church-wide launch after Easter. And so we had already recruited these people to be new host champions for the after Easter we just basically called them and said, guess what? You're on now. You're on now. But the way we did that, so we did kind of a trickle down approach, sort of almost a marketing approach with them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we sent out an email to all of my current leaders and said, you know, hey, you guys know the value of this. We're inviting other people to join us. Would you pray about whether or not you'd be willing to come alongside one or two new leaders and just cheer them on in the process of experiencing, and I said leaders, but we are saying hosts, because this is an experiment in group life before we really on-ramp them into that full leader capacity. So we started with that, and we got, you know, a couple of responses from email. And then we sent out a group text and we said, hey, check your email if you haven't yet. I hope you're thinking and praying about this. Look forward to hearing. And I say we because I actually recruited one of my high capacity volunteers, who's a current group leader, to become a coordinator for this launch. And so she's partnering with me and helping in tremendous ways. And so the two of us, I said, you know, just want to let you know, you're going to hear from one of the two of us in the next week. We're going to give you a call because we would love to talk more about what this looks like. And then that's what we did. We went through the list, and I mean, it was uncomfortable. It felt like cold calls, even though we knew these people, right? It still felt awkward. And yet, man, we were really pleasantly surprised at the number of yeses. It was not a hard sell because we weren't asking too much of them. You know, it was, this is important to you. You know how important it is. Can you do a phone call a week or a text a week to touch base with this person and encourage them? Sure. You know, and so now here we are, and we're getting them assigned, and it has been interesting, I will say, because people are feeling that crisis mode right now. We've had to sweet talk them a little bit this week. Okay, now you signed up to do this. Oh, I don't know if I have the bandwidth for it. Oh, but remember how, you know, I know it feels that way, but there's actually more capacity right now in our lives than we've ever had before. You know, and just, you know, what is it about group life that's so important to you? Oh yeah, we want to really make sure that that happens for these people, you know.
That's great. Well, that kind of falls under the category, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy.
Oh
And,
gosh, yes.
you know, all of a sudden, but, you know, and sometimes it's that reluctance. I think there is a little bit of spiritual warfare that comes. I mean, even for
100%.
myself, it's like, I need to pick up the phone and call these people. Why can't I pick up the phone? It's not hard, but there's just some kind of resistance there. So, wow, Tara, you did a great job. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, with that resistance piece, because I really do struggle with that. And I had a friend who's a spiritual director who gave me the most powerful statement about that inner resistance that I feel. She said, if you don't ask them, if you're afraid to ask, what you're really saying is you don't have confidence in Christ in them. If Christ is in them and he is going to call them and equip them for what they are supposed to do, then you can have the confidence to ask, Tara. You don't have to worry. It's not up to you. It's up to them and the Holy Spirit. So don't have fear about the ask, because you really can just trust Christ in them to direct them to the response that's right for them in that season. That was a huge breakthrough for me.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Yeah, powerful stuff.
See, I wrote it down, text in church. I wrote down online office hours, and I wrote lack of confidence of Christ in them. So that's phenomenal. Yeah. Well, you've accomplished in 10 minutes what it took me 45 minutes to just talk. And these guys are like, you should have had her on first. All right. So we've got a few more minutes. I'm going to unmute everybody.
Sure.
So whether you want to either speak up or there's that chat box, you can type a question in. But what questions do you guys have? We've given you a lot of information today, but what questions can we answer for you? Because I think this is an amazing opportunity.
Well, I'm curious about how people make out with, let's say you've got some leaders. We're trying to encourage all of our leaders to move online, and some are. And we've encouraged them to do little screen grabs from Zoom and post them on our Facebook page, along with some comments. Yeah, and actually, we've had groups that have been meeting every second week, and they were so grateful for this online experience. And we're going to meet every week now, so that's good. But the thing is, I will have some who are resistant to trying, I mean, they may have very little experience with Zoom or any kind of video conferencing. So I'm expecting that to be a challenge. We're certainly working on it, but I'm expecting that as we, get in touch with everybody and individually and say, how are you making out getting online, that's going to be a challenge.
I had the coolest experience with this week. I feel like I'm saying cool a lot. Forgive me. I'm a very 80s girl. Because I did have exactly that. I had a leader who was very resistant. This is one of my established leaders. And she was on one of the spin-up calls, the Zoom training calls, and she honestly was very negative. And, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get people to do this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know if it's worth the try or worth the effort. And I feel like God gave me this visual to share with her of, when you move to a new community, or maybe you're visiting a different town and you want to go to Starbucks because you know that you're going to get something that you love there that feels familiar and comfortable, but you don't know how to get there. You have to use your, the map app on your phone, and you might get into the wrong turning lane, and there might be a median, and you're going to have to do a U-turn and figure it out. And it's frustrating, but you're willing to do it because you know where you're getting is going to be so good and familiar and powerful. Caffeine, thank you. But that's group life, right?
Yeah.
We know group life is so important, and our established leaders know that, but we have to be willing to learn how to navigate a new way to it. And it's worth a little bit of headache on the way
That's
to
a really
get to
good,
where we need to go.
yeah,
And
that's really helpful.
it apparently was effective, because today in my online office hour, that same gal had, she actually is part of a retired teachers group. She had reached out to her retired teachers group and said, I want to start a Google Hangout with you. I've learned how to do it. I'm going to do it. And we're going to have this great meeting. And so she went above and beyond. She went beyond her community group to reaching out to retired teachers and had a prayer meeting on Google Hangout. This is the same gal that 3 days ago had the worst attitude ever.
That's a really good story.
So that's the analogy that I've been leaning into with my people.
Alan, if I can add this,
Sure.
I've been asking, encouraging, or we have been encouraging our leaders to go online, but I think there's a couple of different approaches that sometimes people take. If they email out the people in the group and say, how many are interested in going online? If that's all they say, they're likely to get a lack of enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll tell you what Cheryl and I, my wife, tried, and maybe it's assuming the sale somewhat, but I contacted everybody in my group. Everybody, I still have a couple more to reach, and I gave a Zoom call to every single one, and I helped them get online, and Cheryl did the same. And I think it was in part helping them just get familiar with it. Now they love it, and they see it as a good tool.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Ralph. Appreciate it. Well, we've got right at the top of the hour. And so if you guys have any other questions, you can just email me at alan@alanwhite.org, whatever I responded to you. Tara, thank you very much. So here's how this transpired. I had planned this webinar. You guys had signed up for it. Tara and I were on her monthly one-on-one coaching call. She's in my coaching group, literally 2 hours ago. And she's telling me the story. And I said, could you jump on the end of my webinar? So,
and I'm grateful to have done it.
Here she is. So thank you very much, Tara, for joining us. I have to say you were the best part of this thing. So,
oh, thank
yeah,
you.
definitely.
Well, feel free.
You weren't in for the first part.
No, I wasn't, because I was finishing up that online
That's
office
right.
hour I had. Feel free to share my email. I'd be happy to answer any questions or share information with anybody as you guys are getting things going. So.
Very good. So I'll send you guys the link to Jason DeGraff's article about comparing video services. And then also I'm working on this document, trying to convert it from how to start a small group to how to start an online small group. And so I should have that up in the next day or so. And then I'll also provide the replay to the webinar. If you want to review anything or if you want to share it with anybody, you can feel free to do that. So thank you so much for your time. I hope this is helpful to you. The big thing right now is don't allow this moment to slip away.
Truly.
because God can do things through your church dispersed, unlike things that you've seen.
Mhm.
So even if you start a couple of these groups, if you start 30, if you start 300, then, I think this is the moment. And it's not just one to endure, but it's one to, I was reading an article the other day and somebody said, right now, everything is a startup.
Yeah.
Everything is a startup. So your ministry is a startup. So how can you get it started up? All right. God bless you. Thank you. Have a great
Thanks,
rest of the
Alan.
day.
It was
Thank
really
you, Tara.
helpful, Alan. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Bye-bye.